Today I'm speaking with Mark Peepow, the president of the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum located near the Robert Stanfield International Airport here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, Mark, perhaps you'd like to tell me a little bit about the history of the museum, how it came about, and what exactly you do here.
So on February 14th, 1978, a group of guys got together and created the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum Society. And in 1986, they opened the first part of this museum that we are in this section today. And in 1996, we built another section, which is another hangar, which we'll see later in the show. But the museum is actually the largest aviation museum east of Ottawa. Nova Scotia has a huge aviation history, and we've got a tremendous amount of history that we're able to tell at the museum, and we've got a number of different artifacts.
Now, you and I took a little walk through, and first of all, I have to say, people are going to be amazed just how big it is.
Well, yes, I mean, for the sci-fi fans out there, I always use the thing that there's people always like Doctor Who. Well, Doctor Who lives in a TARDIS, and the TARDIS is a lot bigger inside than it looks outside. That's what we are here. We've got a sort of a museum that people think is just one section, but we have a large hangar in the back, and we cram 33 complete aircraft into this location here. We want to give to visitors like yourself to the museum is to showcase exactly what Canada's role has been, what Nova Scotia's role has been in aviation, and also, you know, what science and technology that we're seeing, and the tremendous growth of aviation technology, and we can showcase those changes throughout our exhibits. And also, Nova Scotia's aviation history started in 1909, and we have an unrivaled aviation history. You know, even today, there's 1,000 flights over us every day. Second World War was fought here. We had a huge contribution with the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan in Nova Scotia. Post-war, the Cold War was fought here. We had huge numbers of aircraft that were operated by the RCF at that point, and modern technology. And that's in addition to airliners and people flying and traveling, and you know, the world has opened up, obviously, since the 50s and 60s, and airline travel has become a nature of common things. And obviously, post-COVID, we're trying to build that things up again, but again, that is one of the challenges we see. So.
You are right, because I do understand that here in the Maritimes, it tends to be the sea, you know, between the fishing and, of course, earlier on with contact with Europe. But, you know, aviation is relatively new in our history. But we do have, as you say, a storied history. I mean, the number of famous aviators who have passed through here is remarkable.
Well, exactly. I mean, every major person you can think of, Amelia Earhart was here, Lindbergh was here.
And the planes themselves, how did they end up coming here?
The aircraft that were collected over time, sometimes they came surplus out of the military, and we have a number of examples of aircraft that were military surplus, or they were cast aside and they were sitting in some base, and we said, well, can we have this aircraft? And the military sort of have provided it to us. There's some that we've actually bought, and there's also some that we've recovered from wreck sites and restored them. And a number of the aircraft we have actually are wrecks that were recovered out of the woods of Newfoundland or out of New Brunswick. It's all a matter about cost and expense, and you know, it's that. So.
Are there artisans or people here that have the talents and abilities to actually restore these aircraft?
Well, it is. I mean, the museum is a volunteer organization, so we have roughly about 100 volunteers that, you know, that can come and work and basically help showcase the talent. We were always looking for volunteers to come and join us, and we want to, obviously, I'd love to see more. We want people to, you know, clean the airframes, work on the airframes, but there's a restoration task. We have a large PBY-5A Catalina flying boat in the back. That's a sort of an ongoing project that's, it's sort of like a bridge. You never really finish painting it. That's still being worked on, and I think it'll be worked on for 20 years to get it. But it's from the passion and basically from the hard work and the blood, sweat, and tears of a key group of volunteers that are committed to showcasing and developing this museum into what it is today. It really is a testament to volunteerism, and it's a testament to getting something done and creating something with very low resources in lots of cases.
We're finding that as we go from museums throughout the province, it's the spirit of the people that are donating a lot of these items to museums, and more importantly, how many of them are volunteer.
Well, absolutely. I mean, nothing happens in, well, Nova Scotia Museum particularly, unless it's volunteers. We have an Avenger that was actually restored by a group in New Brunswick for us, and that's complete now. We always make sure that our exhibits are very complete, and if you look at our aircraft on display, they not only look good, but also inside. We have all the cockpits are complete, and we have to show the technology so we can showcase it. If that means opening up the aircraft to show that, we can do that.
Now, unlike other museums, can a visitor actually sit in one of these?
We don't actually offer that to particularly everyone. Special guests or the special requirement, we sometimes do allow that, but we have had open cockpit days in the past where we actually have opened the cockpits up and be able to put someone in it. And if there's if someone wants to give us a special reason, or they want to be, a great volunteer out here, I'm more than happy to put that out there. So, if you're a volunteer, you certainly have a different access to the airframes than if you're not general public. But we do like to try and create the experience though, because we can't bring the aircraft out of the museum and start them up and fire them up, but at the same time, if you can interact with an exhibit, it leaves a little bit more in your memory and your thoughts once from your visits.
It's a feeling to a link to history.
Well, there is a history, but everyone, history is one of those things that, for people that enjoy history and that learn from our mistakes, that is always something that needs to be taught to people. Is that there's a reason why this happened. Well, this is the reason why it happened, and some people obviously forget that. But we like to think that we can showcase aviation and the role of aviation in history, and Nova Scotia's role is very important to us, and that's part of what we do here.
Well, Mark, I would very much like to go have a look at that hangar and have a gander at some of those planes.
Absolutely, Sandy. We'd love to give you the high tour and show everyone what we've got here and showcase exactly what the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum has to offer to the average visitor.
It's very impressive.
Thank you. Well, Sandy, welcome to the main hangar at the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum. This is where the majority of our collection of airframes actually are, and artifacts, and we've got them all crammed in here. As you can see, we're certainly out of space, and obviously we'd love to show more, but we're at the limits. They're literally hanging from the rafters in here. So we've got a great collection. So of the aircraft here that you're seeing, they all provide a different sort of purpose. We've got fighter jets like the F-86 Canada F-86 Sabre. We've got the Lucky Jetstar, which was used by various prime ministers as their official transportation. Canada's Air Force One, sort of, that would be the best description of it. We've got a CF-100 Canuck, which was built by Avro Canada in the 50s in Walton, Ontario, which is now Pearson Airport. And it was the first Canadian designed and built jet interceptor. And we've also got our Harvard aircraft, which was used as trainers. The trainers and the yellow aircraft were used by the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan during the Second World War. And this was probably Canada's largest contribution to the wartime effort, was the BCATP. And Harvards were used at service flying training schools, which was really the next step in training pilots. They went to an elementary flying training school first. And in Nova Scotia, we had an elementary flying training school, number 17, which was at Stanley, which is just outside Windsor. And they flew little yellow biplanes there, Fleet Finches and Tiger Moths, and they buzzed around the skies of Windsor, and they flew there from 1941 to 43. And that was where the first step where pilots were trained, and that was actually here in Nova Scotia. So very great history aircraft that was actually used here and flown here.
Well, I have to say this is really something for me, because some of these planes I've only seen in newsreels from the war. I'm a big history buff, so I tend to watch it. Like the Sabre and some of these other planes that were always in black and white that I never thought I'd have a chance to actually go and see them.
Well, exactly. The other neat story, obviously, with a Harvard like this, there's a film, a Jimmy Cagney movie called Captains of the Clouds, and it's filmed in color, and it was filmed during the war, and the RCF participated, and they actually decided that they would include their participation. So there's lots of color shots of the Jimmy Cagney flying Harvards and various things like that. And the other interesting part is actually that film, part of it was actually filmed here in Dartmouth during the war.
Now, this trainer would have been used, you say, in Ontario, and here, I suspect, too?
Well, it was used, Dartmouth, they had a couple attached to fighter squadrons. They would use them for training fighter pilots, and they had them on squadron. But they also had service flying training schools, and they were across Canada. So, I mean, there's all this sort of history that's involved in these aircraft, so you don't realize it. But this was actually wartime training, and they flew it operationally on a number of service flying training schools.
Now, they would not only just be training Canadians and British, but they trained other allies too, like Free French and Poles.
Well, yeah, but it was the British Commonwealth. So in this case, Australians, New Zealand, Trinidad, any part of the Commonwealth that contributed. And you said there was obviously a French component as well too, and to some degree Poles. And of course, Canada's contribution was huge to the wartime effort with squadrons and also personnel. And then we haven't even touched on Bomber Command and Fighter Command and all those variety of different things.
Now, how many of these people that were trained in these later became bush pilots?
Well, a lot of the bush pilots actually who were flying prior to the war became the instructors. The bush pilot story is a huge story in Canada because in the 20s and 30s, that's a lot of how Canada was developed by, small planes flying into certain locations they'd never been to.
Now, you see that in old footage. You see the plane coming down on these lakes and that, and it's something that always struck me as very Canadian.
Absolutely. I mean, Canada actually built and designed a number of aircraft that were unique to it. The Otter, the Twin Otter, and they're still all used in that sort of rough, rugged environment that you need an aircraft to get into places that really you can't get in any other way.
So all these pilots would have come out at a time when commercial aviation was expanding.
Well, exactly. I mean, you look at commercial aviation, but even in Atlantic Canada, really in the early 30s, there was a tremendous expansion in passenger. There was actually small airlines set up, and you hopped into a very small twin-engine aircraft that would take you from Halifax to St. John, and they would fly back and forth. So prior to the war, there was a tremendous amount of growth in aerodromes and airfields, and aircraft were becoming used for business, and they were being used for transporting people around. Obviously, the war came and changed that, but then the growth continued after the war. And again, transatlantic flights and the things that we see today and take for granted today had really expanded right after the war because it had been pioneered during the war.
Now, many of these planes you say would have been flown in, so they're still operational. You had a story about a plane that was up on a pole and the guy got in it and it ejected.
Well, that's the CF-100. There was a particular incident where at another museum, not our museum, where they were in the back of a CF-100 and the guy actually decided that he would pull the handle, and he was somewhat surprised when the header box shot across the highway in front of him because someone hadn't deactivated the ejector seat in the back seat. Luckily, he didn't shoot him out in the process, but I think he was a little scared after that.
That's a good story.
It is, but it's even funnier when he was told by the person that was sitting in the seat. But he will remain nameless, but it wasn't our museum, and it's one of the hazards of these aircraft to make sure they're actually properly decommissioned and that you're not carrying any explosive in that ejector seat, because essentially it's a rocket on a stick if you had to get out. And all our aircraft are checked for that, and also if we have weaponry or cannons or anything like that, they're all deactivated, so there's nothing that can be used again or whatever. It's all demilled to some degree. But I mean, these are weapons, though. I mean, these are weapons. In a lot of cases, some of these exhibits have actually been used and fired guns, and not in anger, but they have fired their guns. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to sitting in one of these planes, as long as you can assure me that the ejector seat won't.
Well, this one we'll put you in. We'll make sure it is. I'm pretty much guarantee you won't be flying out of it into the roof or anywhere into the rafters, should we say? So.
Okay, you got a deal.
So I'll give you the full effect. We'll close the canopy on it. Maybe I should let him out now. How was that for full experience?
Wow, that was really trippy, Mark. I mean, I could almost imagine myself being in one of these. Now, I understand you have a flight simulator.
We do. We have a brand new 737 jet passenger airliner simulator that's ready for you to fly today. And we'll get you out of this and get you into that. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Excellent.
I'm speaking with Asif, who is the creator of this here at the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum. And I got to say, I love this. What are the chances of you putting this in my basement?
Well, well, it's possible.
Is it?
I didn't even think it was possible for myself until I came up with the idea for the show I did. And then I just started with a Google search, and here we are, years later.
You did this from a Google search?
Well, yeah, a friend of mine had said, you need to do a new project. I had just broke the fish tank above my recording studio. So it was a disaster, and it basically rendered the studio not functioning for a while. But after we built it up, there was a bunch of monitors left over and a bunch of equipment. And I was sitting in my office with a flight simulator open because I've been in aviation. That's how the idea started. So I figured, I think I can make a cockpit that works. And that's how I did a Google search, home cockpit building. Built everything from scratch in a spare bedroom in our home.
So where did you get all this stuff?
So a lot of this is like, it's sort of like Lego for big kids. They all these parts come separately, and I built the frame, and I the switches, you install each switch separately and use some LED lighting to backlight. And of course, the way it is now, it's built back up, but the wonderful people here, the crew here at the museum have helped me put it all back together. And I don't think I could have found a better home for this.
That's great. Well, I can't wait to take a flight.
Yeah, so John, I think he's going to probably take you on a flight.
Well, thank you, Asif. I must
You're
say,
welcome.
this knocks me out. And I can tell you the kids are going to love this.
Yeah, yes.
I'm not a kid anymore, but if I was a kid, you wouldn't be able to get me out of it. And I'll try not to crash it.
That's right. Good luck. Bon voyage.
Let's go. I'm now speaking with John Letard, who is responsible for the technology here at the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum. And we're going to go on a simulated flight on a 737.
We're currently sitting on runway 05, actually at Halifax International Airport. Now, you'll see a number of displays up front. Those are all the various engine instruments and navigational displays. The main instrument that you'll be looking at will be this one on the far right, and you'll see some information there, some numbers on there, like the 0460, that indicates our altitude. We're currently sitting at 460 feet right now. And then the numbers on the left-hand side, that's going to be our airspeed. So we'll be taking off, and I'll operate the throttle to get us going. And I'll give you direction on what to do as we get up to speed and start to lift off, and we'll just go and fly around a little bit.
You got a deal. Let's do it.
Let's go. Taking off with full thrust. We'll push the nose down a little bit. That's it. A little bit more. Okay, that's good. We'll raise the landing gear. Push the nose down a little bit further. Push down hard.
1,000.
Oh, boy.
There. Now you just want to turn to keep the horizon level.
Oh, this is great.
So there you go. We're doing great. We're flying along. We're right now at about 3,000 feet. And there we are. We're flying nice and level. And of course, we've taken off and turned a little bit to the right from the Halifax airport.
I could always call. We've got good news and bad news. The bad news is the co-pilot didn't fill the tank. The good news is drinks are free.
Exactly. So there you can see off to the right is the Halifax airport.
Ah, there. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so right now we're just doing a nice big circle.
Did you help Asif when he brought it into the museum?
Oh yes, yeah. There was a number of volunteers that got involved with the project when the museum brought it on and started working with Asif to basically put it all back together and get it all working again.
So when you have this stimulator and you've got this picture, this would have been taken from a real plane when you were doing this?
Actually, no. The imagery that's all presented here is all being computer generated on the fly as we're flying, as it's actually running.
You know what? We've been out here flying for a little while. I think I'd like to go home. I think maybe it's time to land.
Okay, well, you know what? You actually positioned the aircraft in a perfect spot to come in for a landing back at Halifax on the same runway we took off on.
Wow.
As you'll see it directly ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, there, that's it. We're getting close now. That's looking good.
Well, John, I want to thank you. It's been quite an experience here.
You're very welcome.
And I'd also like to thank Asif and also Mark. And I highly recommend people come and they see this museum. It's a wonderful museum. You know, this is great, but I thought you were going to drop me off at my house, right? And by the way, you better keep a close eye, because if this keeps up, this might end up in my basement.
That sounds like a great idea.
It does.